guys. I am your host, Lauren LaRose. This is the Little Brain Campaign. Welcome back. I am a board certified child and adolescent psychiatrist and adult psychiatrist, have a private practice in the New Orleans area. And in this podcast, I like to do a deep dive with some experts from various fields related to mental health, physical health of kids and their caregivers. And I have the pleasure today of speaking with Dana Carretta-Stein. She is a therapist. She's also a mom. So she's doing all the things just like I am. And she likes to do trauma focused work, specifically something called EMDR, which we are going to dig into and we're going to learn about this together. So thank you, Dana, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I want you to start just by breaking down for us what is EMDR. First of all, like what does that an acronym mean and what is it exactly?
Yeah, it's the most common question. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a lot of words and vowels, but it's the easiest way to describe it is it's a trauma-informed approach to therapy, meaning that we don't focus on what's wrong with you. It's not symptom management. We look at what happened to you. So it's all based on adaptive information processing. There's all of these like computer terminology things in EMDR, which I don't love, but basically it's our experiences shape our brain. So the
Hmm.
experiences that we have in life, whether younger or older, that shapes our nervous system. And that can be why we're experiencing things like anxiety, depression, etc.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, can you break down for us, like, how does trauma reshape our brain? How does that happen?
Yeah. So if you think about just how we interact with our environment, our experiences will shape how every action has a reaction and so forth. So if we grow up in an environment, so to speak, where, let's say you grew up where there wasn't enough like food to eat, there wasn't enough, like stable housing and things, your nervous system, because you are in survival mode, is going to become more hyper vigilant because we're wired as human beings, we're wired to survive. We're always
Hmm.
going to be trying to live. So we become more mobilized because that energy is to try to go find food, go find shelter, go like to move towards something to live. Because
Hmm.
anxiety is just mobilization. And then where that, it helps us in the moment when it's either too much all at once, too much for too long, or too little for too long, that can kind of make our nervous system get a little stuck. So even though we're maybe not in survival mode anymore, our nervous system still thinks we are. I
Yeah.
always use the example of like, you ever like kind of go on an escalator and you get off and you still kind of feel like you're on it for a little bit.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. So it's really like the same thing of like your nervous system is still reacting to what happened before, even though that's not happening now.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
Okay.
really how it all works. It's just our experiences shape how we react to our environment.
Okay. Okay. So walk us through EMDR in practice. Like, what exactly is happening? So I refer patients for this all the time, but
Yeah.
I've never had EMDR myself. So, like, I really don't know what is actually happening in these sessions.
Yeah. And the cool thing about EMDR is that, there's all this info out there, like it's a structured protocol, but it's really different for every single person
Hmm.
because every single person is different. The like baseline of like overview, like how it looks is that, someone comes in. What we do at our practice is we have our own proven process we call for just therapy across the board, not just EMDR, but it's basically the first 1 to 3 sessions are evaluation, are really getting to understand the nature of the symptoms and so forth. And then the treatment phase where after those 3 sessions where that's the history taking part of EMDR, we're trying to understand what the present day symptoms that you're struggling with, which ones you actually want to work on, because sometimes people come to therapy and they don't want to change certain things, even though they might be maladaptive if they're working for them and there's secondary gains and so forth. And they don't want to work on that. So we're
Right.
establishing goals like, how do we know our work together? is done, that you're good, ready to go on your way. So we're figuring out all of that. And what it looks like with the EMDR and that history taking is, what are the present day symptoms that you do have that you want to work on? These are the goals that you're trying to achieve. And then floating them back and connecting those present day symptoms to past experiences.
Mhm.
And when we say connecting them, we're not going into details. We're almost just, we're creating a target map, we call it. So these are potential memories that are feeding the present day symptoms. So we're just creating a map, kind of make the list. We call it like the headlines. Give me, if these memories were the name of a movie, what would it be called? And then once we have all of those targets, then we do a target sequence plan of, okay, these are the past memories, these are the present day triggers, and these are the future templates. If this is what's happening in the moment, the future template is, this is the desired outcome, how we would prefer to think, feel, and do instead.
Mhm.
So with EMDR, we're processing on those three channels, past, present, and future. And then we go through that target sequence plan and let's pick. So everybody's different. For some people, they do start like the standard protocols. You start with the past and then do
Mhm.
present and then future. For some individuals who, the past can be really destabilizing, we actually sometimes might just desensitize the present day triggers first and then
Mhm.
go to the past. But that's really what it looks like is, let's target the experiences. And it's not just memories. For a lot of people with complex trauma, we're targeting timeframes. So,
Mhm.
0 to 3 years of life, for like clients that was like fifth grade was like a terrible time. So we target that. So we're basically just choosing what we want to pay attention to and let the nervous
Right.
system unfold. That's what that reprocessing is. It's like letting the nervous system have that completion process of
Mhm.
feeling the feelings maybe we didn't get to feel at the time. And that's what it
Mhm.
looks like. It's really creating that history. Oh, I did leave out an important part that I always stress all the time. That's funny that I left it out. The phase two is the resourcing and stabilization part. So before we
Uh-huh.
actually work on the memories and the experiences, phase two is just all about like, let's make sure that you can handle it. Let's make sure that you have tools in your toolbox of how to emotionally regulate enough to tolerate the reprocessing, how to do, I love doing installation of attachment figures. So let's create like a resource team, we call it, of a nurturing figure, a protective figure, so that as we start working on distressing memories, we say, okay, that feeling you get when you think of that person, let's think of that person. And because when we think of things that bring us joy, we feel joy. So we're just pendulating and having things to help us regulate and ground if something becomes too overwhelming.
Mhm.
So that's phase one is history taking. Phase two is that stabilization work. And then phases three is really quick. 3, 4, 5, 6 are all the reprocessing stages.
Mhm.
And then 7 and 8 are reevaluation and closure. Those are really just like something that's done during the work. Like every session that you're reprocessing ends with closure. Every session starts with reevaluation when you're picking up an incomplete like memory that you haven't finished working through.
Mhm.
And I remember when I learned it, it sounded so like this, like so black and white and concrete. But then when you
Mhm.
do it, it actually flows very like it flows very easily, where you're not like, okay, now we're doing phase this, now we're doing it just flows naturally.
Right.
And you kind of see clients just weaving in and out. And the phases don't have to go in order. Like it's just really dependent on what that person needs.
Okay. And so what the actual like eye movement part, the EM part. Okay. So I've
Yep.
heard like some therapists say that they're using their hands to do this. And I've heard some
Hmm.
therapists say that they're using some kind of like computer program or something. How do
Yeah.
you do it in your practice?
So again, everyone's different.
Hmm.
Most of my clients, for the most part, like the tactile. So we call them buzzers. They're over there. But they're just wireless buzzers that you hold in each hand and they vibrate alternatively. So bilateral.
Hmm.
I also have the light bar, which is the eye movements. So for some people, we do both because two modes of bilateral stimulation can be even more effective. That helps with people with ADHD who need help with like really focusing.
Hmm.
And then there are some computer programs that are really cool. There's one called WeMind where they're like scientific theory behind like why their program works is more based on the working memory theory, which is basically, some people are like, oh God, I really can't multitask.
Mhm, mhm,
It forces you to do that, so that taxes your working memory.
mhm,
And when your attention is split on thinking about the distressing experience, and I have to interact with this program where you're following the light, and every time the light changes, you have to hit a button. So you're doing like three things at once.
mhm.
When you kind of splitting your attention in that way, that makes your nervous system actually be able to tolerate the distress associated with that experience because you're not hyper focused on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So basically,
okay,
like, kind of splits the attention so that you can feel the feelings associated with it.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so is part of it, because we know that, like, people who experience trauma, it really, um, it's not just, like, rewiring their brain, it's also realigning their what we call their autonomic nervous system in not a great way, right? Like
Right.
making
Right.
them, perpetually in that fight or flight mode.
Right.
Is the autonomic nervous system targeted too? I'm assuming in this type of therapy.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what's being worked on just organically.
Yeah.
So, because you can think about it like when we get triggered, even when we don't realize it, all of a sudden our heart rate goes up, our breathing shallows, we start like feeling sweaty and things like that. So it all happens subconsciously. So what when we're doing EMDR, part of like that resourcing and stabilization work is helpful so that when you notice, oh, I'm thinking about that and my breathing is getting shallow, then I can manually deepen my breathing and that slows my heart rate down. So now I'm thinking about that experience from a regulated place
Right.
instead of a dysregulated place. And that it's all our nervous system dictates how we perceive something.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
when we're hijacked, we're like, oh God, that's horrible. Everything's bothering me, this and that. But when we're regulated, we're like, oh, you start to notice things differently. You're like, oh, that was terrible. And I can't believe I survived that.
Right.
And you start to see things a little clearer from that regulated place.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, like how trauma is like trapped in your body. It's basically like
Yeah.
releasing that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's really just because the word trauma, even I know everyone's like, oh God, everything's trauma. Like it is overused because it's trauma is not what happened to us. It's what's happening inside of us.
Right.
So I always like think of like a soda bottle. If you shake it and then you don't open it, the bottle gets really hard, right? You ever do that and
Mhm.
it's like
Yep,
it's
yep.
tense and then if you leave it alone for a long time, eventually goes flat. And that's depression. That's because that energy never got released.
Right.
If you shake it, open it quickly, everything fucking flies everywhere.
Mhm.
So the
Yep.
goal is to just let it out little by little so that it doesn't explode, so that it doesn't implode, but that gets to a regulated place.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So how I'm assuming that like EMDR is supposed to be like you do a course of treatment and then you kind of like graduate from it,
Yeah.
quote unquote.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yep. It
Okay.
has an end
How
date. Yep.
how I know that this varies, but like how long does that course of treatment usually last on average?
Yeah. It varies, but it's easier to answer when we first say, like, what is the goal for treatment?
Mhm.
So if the goal for treatment is symptom reduction, like I only really want to work on XYZ, then it could be a lot shorter. It could be 12 sessions, it could be 20, um, because we're not doing comprehensive treatment, which is symptom resolution.
Mhm.
That can be a bit longer. That usually I'll say like it could take a year in some cases. If someone's coming weekly, it can be EMDR in general can be done much quicker. It doesn't need
Mhm.
to be a weekly therapy. It can be done in a 2-week intensive period. So that also like really depends on how you're doing the EMDR, if you're doing it spaced out or a lot at once.
Right.
But yeah, for symptom reduction, it could be, 8, 12, 20 sessions. For symptom resolution, it could be a year. It could be for some people who come, let's say someone has never had any therapy at all before. There's a lot we need to like do before we even touch anything with EMDR.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of psychoeducation, a lot of rapport building.
Right.
So that might be, first I've had clients who it's taken them a year just to be comfortable in therapy before we can even start looking at targeting things with EMDR with reprocessing.
Right.
Um, and then I've had a client who had like such significant trauma and she was done in less than a year. And because she was really, really committed to her work and would practice outside of session, like all of nervous system regulation things, she was learning how to meditate. That really things you do outside of session really does impact how quickly you make progress in session. It's just like going to see a trainer. Like you can go once a week and then not do anything else outside of that 1 week that you see him. And yeah, you
Right.
might get results and you'll get stronger over time, but it'll take longer.
Right.
Versus you go to them once a week and then all the stuff your trainer shows you that day, you do 3 to 4 times a week at home, you get results faster.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see like patterns of types of trauma show up, or is it pretty
Yeah.
random and across the board?
Yeah. Cause it's, the patterns are, um, relational attachment trauma for sure. That's,
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing that I see. And then the other patterns are more single incident PTSD, we call it. We also call it a unicorn for a reason because it's pretty rare, that someone has like one terrible thing that really like hijacked them.
Right.
Um, but that's usually the pattern of the relational component, the attachment stuff, or this, really short term symptom reduction, kind of one incident thing.
Mhm.
But it's
Mhm.
usually not what people think. People hear PTSD and they think war, natural disasters, sexual assault. Those are like the big T traumas.
Right.
And those, I don't see a ton of those in my everyday work.
Yeah.
What I see more of are, we call it like one of my old trainers would call it 10,000 paper cuts
Mhm.
because, with relational traumas, like every time like you have an interaction with somebody and it hurts over time, that builds up. If that doesn't get tended to or, have an empathic ear to just listen to like how much that affected you. So that's
Okay.
definitely what I see more of.
Can you give us some examples of like what does relational trauma mean?
Yeah. So relational trauma is basically what happens, the interactions between people that can affect how one person or both people, how their nervous system is.
Mhm.
So if you grow up in an environment where you're, and I'm very big on like not blaming parents because yes, you should let yourself be angry at your parents because you got affected by them. And eventually we get to the point where you realize like your healing is about you, not them.
Right.
So I'm like, and a lot of times parents are in their own survival mode.
Yeah.
So that child needs couldn't get met because that parent was maybe working like 30 hours, like at a clip to put food on the table for that kid.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, yes, we have emotional needs, but, and this is a therapist saying it, food, clothing, and shelter, right?
Yep.
And emotions are secondary. Like it's at the end of the day, like we don't have time if we're like working a 24-hour shift, we have to put food on the
Yep.
table. We don't have time to be like, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that that child shouldn't get it because they do matter. And it just wasn't possible because of that survival mode that the parent was in.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that's like that relational trauma I see of maybe like that child feeling not attended to, not cared for, all of those things. Because if a parent is distracted and doing something, kids have big feelings. My daughter's too. So, and she lets it rip. And our job as parents is to teach, to do co regulation. kids don't know how to regulate their nervous systems on their own. They don't, it's not a skill that we're born with. It's something that we're taught.
Right.
So if, my daughter has like a big overwhelm, okay, let's take a deep breath and breathe with her. Right. Because I'm not in survival mode most of the time. I have the space to be able to do that for her. But if you think back to, like my parents' generation or like my grandparents, like, Great Depression, things like that, like shit was rough. Like they didn't
Yeah.
have the ability to stop and do that because they were terrified they weren't going to be able to feed their kids.
Yep.
So that's where that interpersonal trauma can come from, is just not getting your needs met and learning how to then give yourself what you didn't get, forgive, and understand where maybe like our caregiver and stuff, like where they're coming from, not to excuse their behavior, but to just understand it on a generational level.
Yep.
That to me is like what like healing the interpersonal stuff is really about.
Yep. And if I had to guess, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like, does this tend to pop up a lot when these people become parents themselves?
Oh my God, it's the
Yeah.
most oh my God. Yeah, my therapist said to me, when I was pregnant with my son, who he was the firstborn, she was like, "I think your generational stuff is getting kicked up. Maybe we should do more than once a week." I was like,
Yep.
"Okay." Like, yeah, because nothing will activate your childhood stuff more than having a child.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. So that's something that I see a lot in my practice too, is these, often, I know this happens with men too, but I tend to see more women probably because I'm a female provider. So
Right.
these women coming in, who have children, especially when the kid gets to an age where like that parent has memories of whatever kind
Yes.
of traumatic experience they had growing up.
Mhm.
Either that or just like if they were raised in a home in general that was like, very stressful and high emotion and volatile. Um,
Yeah.
they're realizing as they're trying to parent their child that like they never really learned the proper way to emotionally regulate and parent.
Right.
And so they're
Right.
in real time struggling with that, and
Right.
needing help.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Our generation, we're like millennial moms and stuff. We're in a very
mhm,
weird place of we're trying to heal ourselves and like teach our kids what we were never taught how to do.
yes. Yep.
And it's weird. It's really
Yeah.
weird. It's
It
it's
is
hard.
super weird. It is.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think it's especially weird when you are a mental health provider because it's like you have
Yeah.
all of this education and knowledge, but you still don't really know how to do it yourself all the time,
Right.
in
Right.
your own
And
life.
it's 1,000%. In the beginning with my son, when I first became a parent, because of what we do for a living, I was so like, oh my God, I don't want to traumatize him. I don't want to traumatize him. And
Yep.
found myself doing too much of like, he has to be able to feel his feelings. Like, I don't want to try to like keep him happy all the time.
Yeah.
But I had to learn that of like, yes, I could co regulate him, but not teach him to avoid the feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
quite the learning roller coaster. I'm just always
And
learning.
like co-regulation is really hard. It's
So
really
hard.
hard to do.
Yeah.
When you are stressed out yourself and you're exhausted and like you have zero gas in your tank, that's a real and your kid is freaking out. It's a hard thing
Yeah.
to do.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
So hard. I know for me, what helps in those moments are like when there's too many other things going on. And my kids pick up on me if I'm dysregulated and all of a sudden they start like acting up. I'm like, okay, they're picking up on my nervous system, that just
Yep.
those mirror neurons are so strong. So what helps me, like even last night, my son was like, like he was just a little more nuts.
Mhm. Yep.
Right? Like I put my phone down and
Mhm.
just put all my attention on him. Because like as a working mom, you're trying to do all the things, this and that makes it even harder. But
Yeah.
then when I like at the end of the day, and the most important thing are my children.
Yeah.
But like this stinking thing makes it really hard. Stupid phone
Yep.
makes it really hard because your attention is constantly getting pulled away.
Yes.
So I put that down. And then when I focus on him, my nervous system automatically kind of shifts. And we think as a woman, at least, like we're wired, literally hardwired to attend and care. Like
Yeah,
nurturing is in our DNA.
right.
And then it's just like that. It feels so natural. And then I feel better and he feels better. And it's everything's better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of like insight and self-reflection in the moment to
Yeah.
notice like, okay, I'm dysregulated.
Right.
My kid, like we can usually tell when our kid's dysregulated. It's harder to tell when we're dysregulated, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then stop and think like, what do I need to do to help myself regulate so that my child can
Right.
regulate? So like
Right. Right.
I want parents to know that like this is not easy. It's hard
No.
to do. Um, and it takes work. It takes a lot of work. And we're all
Yeah.
working at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And having grace with oneself as a parent,
Yeah.
I think is so important
Yep.
because with all this healing stuff out there and stuff, it's like, with things like social media and everything that make it look like parenting is such a walk in the park. It's not.
It's not.
And you're going to, I tell clients all the time, like, you're going to make mistakes as a parent. That's okay.
Yeah.
Giving yourself grace, and especially with kids, like, it's the repair that matters more than anything.
Yes. Absolutely.
Right? Like,
Yep.
you're gonna have ruptures, like, you're gonna fight with your kids, you're gonna do the quote, unquote, "wrong thing." Like, I do the wrong thing all the time. Like, I'm
Yes.
not a
Yep.
perfect parent,
Yep.
but then I'll own it, and I'll
Yeah.
be like I said to my son, like, probably 3 times this week 'cause, it's almost Christmas and the holiday stress is real, and I'm like, "I'm sorry. Mommy's a little on edge. I'm sorry." And he literally looks and he's like, "Thanks." And then they grow up not feeling like everything's their fault and
Yep.
that they're responsible for regulating our nervous system.
Right. Right.
That's
Right.
the goal.
And it also shows them like y- it's better to show your kids that you mess up and can repair than
Right.
you are a perfect parent, right? Because
Right.
perfection is not attainable.
Right.
Okay. So if we are this perfect parent that never messes up, then your kid doesn't know how to correct when they mess up, you know?
Correct. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. We teach them that's okay to not be perfect.
Yep. Yep. And then
Yeah.
it's just like it's something that you are consciously working on. Like we all have to
All
work
day.
to be better parents all the time.
Yeah. I
Um,
would say like to be a good enough parent. That's always the goal. Good
yep,
enough.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Yeah.
So how would someone know if EMDR is right for them?
So the best way to really know is look at like I always love this question because it's like I'm always like, it depends. You know what's right for you if you know, like, let's say, like, you're super anxious all the time and stuff, and you know all the things to do, but you can't do it.
Yeah,
So we know, like, our nervous system is stuck when there is a disconnect between knowing and doing.
yeah,
That's usually how you know, like, okay, EMDR could really, really help because there's something going on inside of you that's making it hard for, like, you know, the nervous system to talk to itself of, like, your brain, your heart rate, all of that.
yep.
So that's usually a good indicator, like when there's that stuckness, that split between knowing and doing.
Okay, I love that answer.
Yeah.
Um, okay, any like parting wisdom that you would like to give the listeners about EMDR and trauma and relational trauma?
Yeah. I mean, EMDR is different for everyone. My biggest thing that I always like to like impart wisdom is talk with your therapist through the process.
Mhm.
Tell them like what's working for you, what's not working for you. You don't have to just sit there and be a recipient of it. It's collaborative.
Yeah,
So as long as I see things on Instagram all the time on my page where people are like, oh, well, my therapist didn't do this, blah, blah. Tell them your therapist wants to help you, but
yeah,
they have to know what's working.
yep,
So just communicating with your therapist through the process really is what makes it, especially in relational trauma. That in itself is like the corrective emotional experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well tell
Mhm.
everyone how they can find you.
So everyone can find me on Instagram and TikTok at the underscore EMDR underscore coach. So the EMDR coach, or my website, which is danacarretta.com, or our practice website, where we have 7 clinicians here that are all EMDR trained. That's peaceful living mental health counseling.com. We're in Scarsdale, New York, but we can see clients in New York, New Jersey, Florida, and Connecticut.
Oh, amazing. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to take
All
over the
right.
country one state at a time.
You gotta get licensed in Louisiana. We need help.
Yes. Yeah. Please. I would love to. I'll look into it.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
Dana, thank you so much for being here. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Little Brain Campaign podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Please take a moment to leave a review while you're still thinking about it. It really helps grow the podcast, and I love hearing from our listeners. See you next time.